AIDS Day, and in his message for the day, the Secretary-General praised the progress made on ending the epidemic and said that the world is on track to provide access to HIV treatment to 30 million people by 2020. However, he added that some parts of the world are lagging behind, with women and girls in Africa being most at risk, and he called for a renewed commitment to make AIDS a thing of the past. And after we're done with the briefing, we'll have Brendan come up, and then we'll have our guest Simon Bland, who heads the New York office of the UN Joint Program on HIV/AIDS. A couple of travel and senior appointments. Travel-wise, the Deputy Secretary-General will depart New York for CAIRO today to hold consultations with senior Egyptian government officials as well as the United Nations country team in Egypt. On Monday, she will proceed to Frankfurt to attend a meeting of the G20 Eminent Persons Group. The Deputy Secretary-General will return to New York on December 4th. And I have a senior personnel announcement to make. The Secretary-General is appointing Colin Stewart of Canada as his special representative for Western Sahara and head of the UN mission for the referendum in Western Sahara, known as MINURSO. Mr. Stewart succeeds Kim Bolduc of Canada. The Secretary-General is very grateful to Ms. Bolduc for her strong leadership and perseverance over the course of her tenure. Mr. Stewart brings to the position demonstrated management and leadership with more than 25 years of experience in peace and security and in international affairs. Most recently, he served as deputy head and chief of staff of the UN Office for the African Union in Addis Ababa. He's also held appointments in a number of UN field offices, and we have more information about him in our office. And with some 136 million people around the world in need of aid and protection due to conflicts, natural disasters, epidemics, and disasters, the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs today issued an appeal for a record amount of $22.5 billion. These funds aim to reach 91 million of the world's most vulnerable people in 2018 with food, shelter, health care, and other basic assistance. The Emergency Relief Coordinator, Mark Lowcock, said today from Geneva that aid workers can only respond to the growing needs with the generous support of donors. He emphasized that investing in coordinated response plans is a sound choice, which helps to deliver tangible and measurable results and has a proven track record of success. And in Geneva, the UN Migration Agency launched its World Migration Report 2018. The publication seeks to shed light on complex issues around migration, including labor migration and remittances, smuggling and human trafficking, integration and irregular migration, and it's available online. I also want to flag that on Monday, the prep meeting of the Intergovernmental Conference to adopt a global compact for safe, orderly and regular migration will kick off in Puerto Vallarta in Mexico. And the Special Envoy for Syria, Stephane de Mistura, released a paper on the 12 living intra-Syrian essential principles, which was distributed by the Special Envoy to delegations in parallel meetings yesterday, and you will have seen the note that we shared with you on that a few minutes ago, as well as the transcript from last night's press conference by Mr. de Mistura. The Deputy Emergency Relief Coordinator, Ursula Mueller, concluded her 4-day visit to Turkey today. During her visit, she met with senior government officials and humanitarian partners to discuss the achievements and challenges of the cross-border operations in Syria. She also commended the ongoing partnership between the government of Turkey and the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. While in Gaziantep, she also met with authorities and humanitarian partners to discuss cross-border operations in the response to the Syrian humanitarian crisis. And she thanked the people and government of Turkey for doing so much to assist people in need and for their support for renewal of the resolution. Turkey hosts over 3.2 million refugees within its borders and facilitates delivery of critical humanitarian assistance through cross-border options. And UNHCR tells us from Zambia that the number of refugees fleeing militia violence in the southeast of the Democratic Republic of the Congo into Zambia has crossed the 12,000 threshold, with more than 8,400 arrivals in the last 3 months. 80% of the refugees are women and children, driven out by extreme brutality of rampaging militias, with reports of civilians being killed, women being raped, private property looted, and houses torched. The Kanani Transit Center, which currently hosts over 8,000 refugees, is filled to capacity. Zambia has made more land available for a new site, but UNHCR and its partners urgently need resources to develop the new site and for refugees to receive life-saving assistance. And as I mentioned, in addition to our two briefers today, at 3 p.m., please don't forget the briefing by the President of the Security Council for the month of December, the permanent representative of Japan, and he will be here to brief you on the program of work.
At 3?
At 3. Right here. Was that your question?
No, I haven't.
But go ahead. That was an easy question. Go ahead.
Thank you. Reuters reported today that they have access to a secret report by UN investigators in affirming that the missiles fired at Saudi Arabia were made in Iran. Can you confirm or deny this report?
No, neither. As you know, at least from what I read in the press reports, it appears to be a report of a panel of experts to Security Council Sanctions Committee. It is not something that comes through our office. Yes, sir.
Do you have any comment on this reported walkout of the Syrian government delegation in Geneva that was not in Mr. de Mistura's?
No, I think I will let our colleagues in Geneva speak to that. It's an ongoing situation, and they're best. They will speak to it. The Secretary-General is obviously being kept informed by Mr. de Mistura of all the developments. Mr. Lee.
Sure. I wanted to ask you, upon his return to Yaoundé, Cameroon, from the AU-EU conference in Abidjan, Paul Biya did a national address, and he said that there's secessionist violence, and he's going to crack down on it and put an end to it. And people have said that already, basically, kind of roundups and the targeting of any youth between a certain age has come about. What I'm wondering is, given that the UN has been calling for dialogue for some time, do they see this, which was triggered by the deaths of some policemen, as a negative step? And what's the UN trying to do to stop what many people see as a forthcoming escalation?
Well, we're obviously still looking at exactly what the president said. Our appeal for calm continues. Our availability to support the search for a lasting solution to the crisis in the Anglophone provinces remains.
In terms of the UN, either its envoy or the Secretary-General or Deputy Secretary-General or anyone else, when's the last time? Is the last time that the UN at that level has spoken with the president was that meeting in Yaoundé in October?
The last time the Secretary-General spoke to the president was at that meeting. I'm not aware of any other contacts, but in terms of Secretary-General, that was the last time.
Yeah, thank you, Stephane. Obviously, this opening of the blockade in Yemen is not taking place. The Secretary General met with the Security Council, and then they issued a statement demanding immediate opening of the blockade, or alleviating the situation there. However, it seems this is not working. Is the Secretary General intending to meet again the Security Council and demand something?
What we have seen, I think, as we've updated you regularly over the last 3 days, we have seen some progress with some ships being able to berth. Obviously, we would like to see all the commercial ships cleared to land. As I said, we've seen some progress in the right direction, but obviously we're not at the level of unimpeded and free humanitarian access that we would like to see.
When you say some, how many ships so far?
I think I briefed you yesterday. I think we're talking about three.
One ship.
Yeah, I think there are 3 ships altogether, but I'm waiting for an update from
3
OCHA.
in 2 weeks.
I'm just saying in the last few days, because we know that when the blockade has been somewhat lifted. So as soon as I have more of an update from my colleagues at OCHA, I will give one to you. Abdelhamid.
Yes, 10 members of the U.S. Congress wrote a strong letter to Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, calling him to rescind his decision to destroy 2 Palestinian communities, Al-Khan al-Ahmar and Susia. It's unprecedented for 10 U.S. Congress to write that. However, we're still waiting for the special envoy, Mr. Mladinov, to say something about that. Why he's not saying that, anything? so far?
I think these issues have been raised, and we've made our concerns known. Iftikhar, then Matthew.
Thank you, Stephane. Do you have any statement by Secretary General on the terrorist attack at agriculture college students in Peshawar, Pakistan?
We obviously, the Secretary General is aware. He's seen the reports. He condemns these attacks in no uncertain terms. I think attacks, especially on students, is especially heinous. He will be writing to the government of Pakistan to express his condolences, which he sends to the families of the victims and the people of Pakistan. Sorry, Matthew and then Absalom. Go ahead.
I wanted to ask you, you mentioned Egypt. I wanted to know, is the UN aware of this claim by Ahmed Shafiq, a potential presidential candidate, saying that he's in the UAE and was barred from going back? And so that's one question. The other one is just, is this is this going to become a way of outreach? What triggers the Deputy Secretary General's trip to Egypt to meet with the country team at this time?
We've seen the press reports. It's unrelated to that specific case. We're not going to. So I mean, the Deputy Secretary General's trip was scheduled long ahead of it. There are a lot of issues to be discussed, notably on development issues, and we'll brief you after her trip.
Do you think that press freedom? I mean, it's almost many of the press freedom groups around the world have talk about different people that are in jail there. Do you think that she'll be raising?
I think
press freedom
I don't want to give out pre-readouts of her meetings.
And I wanted to, just also on travel, I'd seen put together some online clues, and I wanted to ask if you can confirm if the Secretary General is going to be traveling to Japan in the near future to a health conference there.
As you know, once we're able to confirm travel, we will. Often other parties announce trips, but until we announce it, it's not official. In the back, Madame, and then we'll go to Monsieur.
Two questions, one on Yemen and the other one on Palestine. On Yemen, when you say, do you get any answers why the blockade is not fully lifted yet when you are talking to the Saudi?
I think those are questions best answered by the Saudi-led coalition. And
but you are in contact with them.
We are in contact, but we're focused on trying to get as much aid in as possible. As for the reasons, I think that's questions you need to ask them.
On Palestine, on Gaza, the winter and the very the siege there. Is there any way to try to ease it, especially that the situation is going from worse to, I don't know, to catastrophic, or if it's not already catastrophic?
Well, we've raised our concerns over and over again about the humanitarian situation in Gaza with the authorities in Israel, the authorities in Egypt, and also encouraging the full implementation of the intra-Palestinian agreements to ensure that the people of Gaza are able to live with the best access to humanitarian aid that they need. So it's issues that are continuously being discussed.
But I mean, a follow-up. But I mean, you have been doing this since a long time, and there is no really practical steps that are taking on the ground. So what are you willing to do to?
These are issues that we keep hammering at. We raise publicly and privately. Obviously, the UN doesn't control the access. The UN doesn't control the situation on the ground. But we're trying our best to get as much humanitarian aid in. Abdelhamid.
Yes, Israeli Minister of Social Equality, her name is Gila Gamliel, said that the future Palestinian state should be in the desert of Sinai, on the Sinai Peninsula. And yet these statements are not listed on the UN report or in the UN incitement narration in the report of Mr. Mladinov. Have you heard of this statement?
I haven't seen any report. The Secretary General's position on this issue has been clear. Matthew, then Nizar, sorry.
I wanted to ask, a couple days ago, I'd asked you about, you'd said, and maybe you'd said that you don't see any UN staff connection to the indictment that was brought against Sheikh Gadio and Patrick Ho. And I'd said to you that it was said at the bail hearing for Mr. Gadio that the resident representative, that a UN staff member in Equatorial Guinea paid his bail, which seems from online sources.
Well, I think from what I read, the person happens to be the spouse.
Yes.
Which I think is the more relevant fact.
Right.
Yeah.
But, I mean,
and I'm not going to comment on what a spouse might.
Okay, but I'll say
this person did this as a spouse.
Right.
Right, and I would hope my spouse would do the same.
I knew that
you'd
go with family values, but my question is this: you'd said no UN staff members involved, and so I wanted to ask you the following: the person is the resident representative in Equatorial Guinea, but it was now represented in the bail hearing that they'll be back in Maryland. So there are obviously questions that are raised that can't go behind some veil of. What I wanted to know is the person still the resident representative in Equatorial Guinea for the UN? Number two, given what's alleged in the indictment, I guess let me go back to the original question. There's going to be a bail hearing for Mr. Patrick Ho now, today. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to know, at what point does the position that this case doesn't have to do with the UN, even though it describes facts that took place right down the hall from here?
That's not what I said. I said we are taking a look at the whole situation. We have more to announce. We will. I didn't say the case had nothing to do with the UN because it clearly involved NGOs. That was an NGO that was involved here, and as I said, we've suspended our relationship with them. So that's what I said. As for the status of the spouse of the person who was indicted, I can check. I believe she still is the resident representative, but we can double check. Okay, Nizar.
Yeah, before leaving Geneva, the Syrian delegation accused Mr. de Mistura of not consulting with them about many things. One of them is this statement or paper, which you mentioned earlier in the briefing. Is it his prerogative to make suggestions without consulting first with both parties about it?
This is an ongoing developing situation. I think those questions are best answered by Mr. de Mistura and his team on the ground. Mr. de Mistura is an able mediator and negotiator, and I'm not going to start commenting on what he's doing from here. Okay. Yes.
Yeah, I have another question because I'm sorry, I didn't know that the pushback would be in that way. But I wanted to ask you. So Mr. Gadio is described as being in the building and in the office of Mr. Kutesa, et cetera. He's not a member of China Energy Fund group. So I wanted to know is what are the and I think I'd asked you in writing actually on Friday. You were away the Friday after Thanksgiving. Under what pass did Mr. Gadio come into the building? I know at one point he was also the Organization for Islamic Conferences representative on CAIRO, but the context that are described,
I don't
for example,
know, obviously,
does the spouse of a resident representative have some type of a pass? These are not private questions. I'm asking you how a person charged with bribery.
Okay.
Okay.
Obviously, those details would be looked at. Spouses of staff members do not have passes that enable them to come in and out of the building. Thank you.
If you sign somebody in and they committed bribery, would this be a
as I said, everything will be looked at. Thank you.
Well, I hope that's what an audit is for.